The lobby at ArcLight Continental was a performance. 40 feet of marble, brass ribs in the ceiling like a cathedral, deciding whether it still believed. Chicago lit itself in the glass behind me, November wind wiring sound through the revolving doors. At 9:13 a.m., my badge turned red. The security gate chimed a little denial, polite as a maitre d' telling me the table did not exist. Victor Lang didn't do the firing himself. He liked the theater without the blood. HR guided me into a conference room with a wall that pretended to be wood. I counted the fake grain lines. There were 52. "Your role is redundant, Elise," said the HR director, head tilted, voice too hydrated. After the realignment under Tyler's transformation program, Tyler Lang was in the corner. Blue suit like a screen without a movie. He smiled with the confidence of someone who'd only ever lost small games that didn't matter. I had built the skeleton that moved ArcLight's money without making a sound. Risk pipes, compliance arteries. I wrote the pulse that kept regulators agreeable and auditors pleased. It wasn't glamorous. It was reality. Tyler cleared his throat, the way people do when they want to sound like the reason. "We're modernizing, Elise. AI, cloud first, fewer bottlenecks." He glanced at the HR director as if the word bottlenecks had a tip jar. They slid a folder toward me, paper, not digital. Final paycheck, NDA, a sentence about return of company property that presumed everything I carried had belonged to them in the first place. No severance. No celebration of the 13 outages I prevented by noticing the noise a particular log made when its timestamps drifted. No gratitude for the month I slept in an office chair during the settlement integration. I signed the NDA. I returned the laptop, the access token, the too heavy key fob that eternally smelled like someone else's decisions. What I did not return was knowledge. Knowledge has no barcode. It is a mirror in a hallway where lights go on only when you're already halfway through. On the elevator down, I stood between a courier with a box of embossed invitations and a woman telling her mother she couldn't come home for Thanksgiving because the quarter wouldn't close itself. Gus Moreno, head of facilities, stepped in at 21, nodded at me like men who have seen elevators confess things. "You good, Park?" "Always," I said, and meant it in the way surgeons mean that word after stitching themselves up. Outside, Chicago took my temperature and pronounced me ready. No plan. Just a calendar that would soon care about day 37. Night was honest in my apartment. No art on the walls. A single fern that didn't believe in me yet. I brewed coffee at 11:41 p.m. Out of habit, then let it cool out of contempt for habit. I opened my personal terminal. No ArcLight credentials. None needed. People think revenge starts with a list of names. It doesn't. It starts with hinges, the unnoticed pieces that let doors pretend to be inevitable. ArcLight's risk system didn't live in a monolith. It lived in contracts. Licenses. SLAs. Escrowed code that vendors held like cathedral music in sheet form, waiting for a conductor to nod. One of those vendors was Heliotrope Ledgerworks, a dull name for the only compliance engine most mid-cap financials trusted enough to sign in public. I had negotiated the escrow clause. If ArcLight violated the maintenance payment schedule by 14 days, Heliotrope had the right to suspend rule propagation for the affected tenants, a phrase that sounds compassionate until you are the tenant. Tyler had wanted to pay quarterly, to increase cash agility. I had written a memo with numbers and thunderstorms, warning against it. The CFO ignored it to treat the warning as an expense is a nice trick if you can afford it. I didn't need to breach anything. I didn't need to touch a system that still called me by old credentials. I needed only to become a mirror that Heliotrope could look into and see its own contract. At 2:06 a.m., I scheduled 12 emails for dates nobody at ArcLight pays attention to unless the espresso machine is broken. The 15th, the 29th, and the day after payday. Not from me. From the auto-pay ghost I had trained while I still had a badge. A series of routine batch confirmations that would look green until they didn't. Revenge is not sabotage. Revenge is gravity reminding arrogance that floors exist. I slept for 4 hours, woke to a room that had not changed, and began my new job. Not talking. Day 3. I walked past Arclight's building and bought a pretzel I did not want from a cart that wanted to be a story. Day 7. I received a LinkedIn message from Tyler's assistant. It had been sent to 28 people. Arclight is hiring visionary thinkers. I wished the assistant luck with her rent. Day 12. I answered a call from Henry Sloan, CIO of Portwell Mutual, a major client whose audits never smiled. He didn't ask about my employment status. He asked me what I thought of an article about cloudifying compliance. Articles are promises written by people who won't be there when the promises arrive, I said. He laughed. Jazz on the other end of the line. Day 14. The first hinge moved. Heliotrope sent Arclight a polite reminder. We note a variance in the maintenance payment schedule. Kindly confirm receipt. Accounting moved it into a queue labeled After Close. After close is where companies place time when they hope it will forget them. Day 19. My auto-pay ghosts filed routine OK flags from Arclight's treasury system. The flags were green inside Arclight's dashboards and invisible to Heliotrope's ledger. 2 green truths passing each other with a wink. Day 24. I had tea with Gus in a diner that carved its pie like ritual. You left neat, he said. Messy is loud, I said, and we split the cherry slice anyway. Something's off, he admitted, eyes in his coffee. New kid says he's simplifying log sources. Simplifying means not reading them. Logs are like old men in a park, I told him. They repeat themselves for a reason. Day 28. Arclight held a town hall. The internal stream lagged by 8 seconds. I watched from a bar where the sound was off and the captions misspelled courage as courage. Victor promised a frictionless future. People clapped. People always clap for gravity until it includes them. Day 31. Heliotrope's second notice went out. This one sounded like a librarian who has asked nicely twice. The subject line, payment irregularity, escalation contemplated. Accounting added it to a queue labeled Victor. Items in Victor do not move until they can be posed as someone else's idea. Day 34. I stood on the Riverwalk and listened to the city breathe like a sleeper who has not forgiven sleep. Day 36. I set an alarm for 3:11 a.m. Quiet is a kind of consent. I turned it into a signature. Day 37 waited. At 3:11 a.m. On day 37, Heliotrope's escrow clause found its reflected face. The seat of a seesaw realized someone had let go. Hinges moved and did not squeak. The rule propagation channel that feeds bank partners and regulators went from live to pending to no route. Inside Arclight, dashboards still flashed green because green is cheaper to render than truth. 3:12 a.m. Email filters designed by someone who hated nuance hid Heliotrope's automated suspension notice under vendor noise. 3:18 a.m. A nightly settlement batch discovered that compliance gates were decorations. It paused. Pauses have weight when money is in the room. 5:50 a.m. Gus texted me a single word. Hearing. He meant the building. When a tower panics, it has a pitch. 7:03 a.m. Portwell Mutual's regulator feed attempted to reconcile Arclight's positions and found error. Henry Sloan sent a 5-word message to Victor. We need to talk. Now. 8:10 a.m. Arclight's traders sat at desks, glowing with screens that believed in themselves. Keyboard clacks sounded confident, then confused, then conspiratorial. 9:04 a.m. Town Hall 2, Emergency Edition. Tyler's hair arrived first. Victor's voice had corners. We're experiencing a temporary vendor synchronization issue, he said, which is corporate for the ice looks thick, until it doesn't. Mara, off camera, stared at a number that had never existed until this morning. The cost of being wrong in public. 9:13 a.m. An internal channel titled Number Wins posted a photo of a dog to keep spirits up. 47 emojis appeared. A culture is a river. Emojis are its leaves. 10:22 a.m. Heliotrope's legal sent the third and final notice. Suspension in effect, per Section 11. Someone in legal searched the knowledge base for Section 11 and got nothing because the knowledge base was maintained by people paid to win meetings, not wars. 10:41 a.m. The CFO convened a war room because we like to romanticize our emergencies. Coffee arrived to make fear responsible. 11:03 a.m. Henry called me. Not Arclight. Me. What would you do? He asked. If a partner's compliance propagation went dark without corruption in the source. I'd assume the music stopped because someone kicked the jukebox to save quarters, I said. He exhaled in a way that meant Chicago. If Arclight doesn't fix this in 6 hours, Portwell's board will interpret it as neglect. We don't survive neglect interpreted by boards. Do you want me to fix it for them? I asked. I want you to do something better, he said. I want you to build it so I never have to ask them for anything again. There are phone calls you remember because they end. You remember this kind because they begin. 11:29 a.m. I took the L home, sat at my table, opened a notebook I only used for decisions that changed the color of the room, and wrote, Portwell, custodial compliance, pipe, prototype, 9 days. Engineers lie the way poets do by telling the truth that matters and ignoring the clock. 12:42 p.m. Arclight's war room located the problem, but not the reason. Tyler proposed a hotfix involving a generic adapter that would yank rules directly into Arclight's warehouse, bypassing Heliotrope's suspended channel. Mara's mouth made a shape like fines. Victor's eyes preferred a shape like tomorrow. 3:20 p.m. Heliotrope's VP of something arrived on a video call to say nothing that could be screenshot without embarrassment. He offered to expedite reinstatement upon immediate payment plus a compliance audit fee no one had budgeted for. Victor nodded as if nodding were a currency. 5:05 p.m. Regulators do not care about charisma after 5 p.m. They care about timestamps that do not match and gaps that look intentional. 6:30 p.m. Gus walked through a floor so quiet it auditioned as a church. He texted me, If you were music, where would you hide? In the vents, I replied. Old buildings remember key signatures. 9:11 p.m. The war room had pizza. Fear got tired and ordered carbs. 10:58 p.m. Arclight flipped Tyler's hotfix. The adapter inhaled rules in a surge that looked like progress. The room cheered the way drowning men cheer rain. 11:07 p.m. Security alarms in the data layer noticed unauthorized pathing. After the layoffs, no one remained who spoke their dialect. They whispered warnings into a logging sync that believed in minimalism. 11:43 p.m. I closed my notebook and stared at the fern. It had decided to live. Day 38. Portwell's board met at SUA a.m. Henry's recommendation had 4 lines. Build independent pipe. Escrow validation built in. Vendor agnostic. Hegulator first. Ask Elise Park to lead it. They asked how long. He said 9 days for prototype. They asked how sure. He said, sure enough to be embarrassed if I'm wrong. Day 39. Arclight's markets functioned like a man running with a hand on the wall. Victor recorded a video to employees about resilience. He used the word resilience the way people use destiny, as if saying it built stairs. Day 40. I took Henry's call in a coffee shop that roasted beans like it feared regret. I can fund a skunk works, he said. I can hide it under something boring, like documentation modernization. I'll need 3 people who understand that doing it right is faster, I said. Name them. I did. 2 were contractors. One was a kid who'd sent me an email a year ago describing a bug, like a poem. Day 41. We rented a room with windows that didn't open, just to remember why we wanted air. The kid, Neil, brought snacks like a peace offering to the future. We drew the pipe on a whiteboard that had seen things. Principle 1. The regulator is the primary consumer. Principle 2. Every rule carries its own explanation. No orphans. Principle 3. Payment schedules are keys. Keys unlock or close gates automatically. Are we building a compliance engine? Neil asked. No, I said. We're building a promise you can screenshot. Day 42. Arclight paid Heliotrope everything and more. Reinstatement began. Tyler claimed victory with a smile that didn't understand categories. Mara watched the outflow like a woman who had learned to count by counting. Victor spooled talking points about partnership and lessons learned. Day 43. Heliotrope's pipe flickered back. The market pretended it had never been afraid. Markets are old men who rewrite their youth each morning. Day 44 to 47. We built. We argued with a stubborn database that wanted its fields to be personal. We wrote unit tests like prayers from a small faith that knows the roof leaks. I asked for no miracles. I asked for determinism and logging that told the truth even when it made us look bad. Day 48. Prototype sang. Not loudly. But if you pressed your ear to the door, you could hear the melody. Henry invited 3 board members and a lawyer who had never smiled at me. We ran through a demo where a regulator feed could audit the audit itself, cross-check rules against the payments that allowed them to exist. The lawyer smiled. Carefully. Like testing a bridge. Name it, Henry said. Northline, I said. Something you can follow when the power fails. Day 49. Arclight got a letter. Regulators liked the reinstatement, but didn't like what the pause had implied. They asked for a timeline about hardening. Victor formed a Tiger team. Tiger teams are mostly about the stripes. Day 50. Henry sent a message to Victor. Portwell will be moving critical reconciliation to a partner-operated channel under an innovation pilot. Victor read it twice and called me. Elise, he said, as if I were a page he'd meant to bookmark. We should talk about returning. I don't return, I said. I arrive. Silence. Then a chuckle he hoped sounded like strategy. Let's meet anyway. Day 51. We met in a restaurant that wanted to be a vault. Victor wore contrition well. Men like him collect it like art. You know the business, he said. You know our clients. You know where the bodies are not buried. Bodies, I repeated. Plural. He raised a hand, a peace sign for an audience of one. We were wrong. About the role. About you. Name your title. Titles are coats, I said. They fit until the weather changes. He leaned in. What do you want, Elise? To build systems where payment schedules aren't just finance decisions but moral ones. He blinked like I'd handed him a museum. We can do that here. We could have, I said. You dismissed the memo. He rubbed his thumb against his index finger as if memory were friction. I can triple your comp, he tried, finally arriving where men like him begin. I don't want to be inside your ship, Victor. I want to sell the lighthouse. He didn't understand. He smiled anyway. Send terms. I did not send terms. I sent a price. Northline launched on a Tuesday at 10:01 a.m. Because launches at 00 make people nervous. Portwell went first custodial compliance under their own authority, with keys that turned themselves when payments sang. We built 2 more pilots quietly, one with a regional bank that collected silence for a living and one with a fintech that still believed in adjectives. I took no victory laps. I collected logs and thank yous and silences that meant we had removed a particular kind of fear from the room. Arclight watched. Arclight inquired. Arclight calculated how much it would cost to pretend Northline had been their idea. Then a man named Rafe, from Arclight's procurement, wrote to Henry. We'd like to evaluate Northline under an objective framework. Objective is the adjective you put on a scale when the numbers need friends. Henry forwarded it with a note. You should answer. I did. Evaluation requires access, I wrote. Access requires payments that know their place. They blinked. Procurement asked for a discount. I sent a PDF. Page 3 contained a single sentence. A discount is the price you pay to keep the old story. Victor called. Cute line, he said. I don't write lines, I said. I write pipes. What's your number? He asked. I told him. 8 figures. Annual. With an exit clause that favored gravity. He laughed like men laugh when they've found the floor and hoped it was a trampoline. He countered. I did not move. He waited 3 days. I watered the fern. On day 63, Arclight's board met. Mara argued for my number with the fatigue of a person who had paid for lessons and wanted a diploma. Tyler argued for heroism. Victor argued for time. The board gave him 30 days to produce a different future. Victor decided to build instead of buy. He hired a consultancy that quoted a deck rather than a system. He formed committees with names that sounded like ships: Aegis, Spire, Crown. I slept well. Consultancies, like monarchs, prefer parades to plumbing. They designed algorithms that wore tuxedos and forgot their socks. They proposed a friendly escrow emulation that would convince vendors their money had arrived by anticipation, a word that does not appear in accounting. While they plotted a mirror, Northline shipped a validator that could prove in cryptographic plainness that the rule you were obeying had been paid for, not promised, not intended, paid. Henry scheduled a joint call. He invited Arclight's legal team, the consultancy partner, a regulator who never remembered my name and called me engineer, and the ghost of every corner cut since billing systems learned to lie. We demoed Northline's evidence ledger. The regulator asked one question. If a payment is clawed back, what do you show me? I pressed a key. The screen turned the color of truth. A red hinge, I said. So we can talk about the door you thought was still there. Silence. Then the regulator said, Arclight, this would have prevented the confusion last month. In government, confusion is a mercy word. Mara looked at Victor and did not look away. Day 77. Arclight's stock twitched. Rumors have a gate. A blog no one admits to reading wrote, Big Fish may outsource its conscience. Tweets did what tweets do, turned nuance into a parade and then into a fire. I went for a walk. I passed the building that fired me like a punchline. Gus stood outside, face tilted to the odd winter sun. They're talking about lighthouses in there, he said. Do they know how to swim yet? I asked. People who own boats think swimming is a hobby. Day 80. Victor caved. People like him call it strategic pivoting when a wall finally admits its job. He called Henry, then me. We'll take Northline, he said, breath controlled. At your price. Good, I said. And at my terms. He waited for the cliff notes. I gave him cliffs. Term 1. Payment schedules are public to the regulator. Term 2. Northline runs outside Arclight's firewalled narrative. Term 3. If Arclight misses 14 days, the pipe shuts itself and writes a letter to the future with receipts. Victor didn't laugh. He asked a question that tasted like metal. What if we miss 7 and make it up? That's religion, I said. This is plumbing. He signed. Not because he believed, but because he ran out of verbs. Day 86. We turned Northline on for Arclight. It hummed, politely, like a machine that understands embarrassment. For 3 weeks, the city behaved. Arclight shipped numbers into months. Tyler cut ribbons on things that had been built by other hands. And then the calendar came for him. Quarter-end Friday, 4:03 p.m. An Arclight treasury job misrouted maintenance funds into a suspense account cheerfully named Hold Me, Maybe, by an engineer who'd meant it ironically 2 administrations ago. The payments didn't sing. Northline listened, heard the silence, and closed the gate. The evidence ledger wrote a letter in red-hinged glyphs the regulator could read without coffee. The war room convened like a muscle memory, Victor barked. Mara did math. Tyler composed an email about anomaly remediation that turned the anomaly into a house guest. At 6:11 p.m., Victor called me. You can't do this, he said. It's an error. We'll fix it Monday. You can fix it now, I said. Money is a present tense verb. Be reasonable, he said, and put his reason on the table like a tip. I was reasonable when I wrote the memo. I said, "This is physics." He went quiet. A kind of quiet that has consider in it. "We're going to the press," he tried. "About what?" I asked. "A pipe that obeys your signature?" He hung up. The city paused. Buildings do that when they realize their reflections aren't loyal. At 7:02 p.m., Arclight missed a filing window to a minor regulator with a long memory. At 7:18 p.m., a journalist called it a stutter. At 7:30 p.m., the blog that doesn't sleep called it a shiver. At 8:01 p.m., Northline posted a public status note to regulators only. Gate closed per term 3. At 8:14 p.m., the skyline dimmed not lights, but confidence. Same wattage, different city. Victor wired the funds at 8:37 p.m. Gates reopened at 8:38 p.m. The difference between 37 and 38 minutes is where truth writes its memoir. On Monday, a reporter asked me for a quote. I sent 7 words. Systems are promises with receipts or theater. They printed 6. Portwell expanded Northline to cover a division they used to call the attic, because that's where you put things you'll need at the worst moment. The regional bank brought cupcakes and an invoice. The fintech wrote us a poem in code comments. Arclight kept me on speed dial and off holiday lists. Mara sent an email once, subject line, "Thank you for the math." Gus dropped off a plant that didn't believe in me yet and left a note. Water is a schedule. Tyler got a new title with fewer syllables. Victor practiced the word transparency in mirrors. The city exhaled. I took a walk at 9:13 a.m. on a day with no badge. The river remembered nothing. The wind remembered me. People think revenge is an explosion. It's not. It's a lighthouse you build on the shore of a story that sank, so the next ship doesn't have to learn the same night twice. I didn't watch Arclight's skyline go dark. I watched it learn the cost of pretending the ocean was optional. Then I went home. The Fern had decided to forgive me permanently. I wrote invoices that were not apologies. And for a moment, the city felt correct.